Last Pint Productions presents the New Way podcast. The New Way contains adult content, and new episodes are released most Wednesdays. So back off, man. We're professionals. Listener discretion is advised.
So you were in Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah?
Were you in the shit?
Yeah, I was in shit.
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain.
Here's how you get him. He pulls a knife, you pull a gun. He sends one of yours to the hospital, you send one of his to the morgue.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me. I'm naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Hello and welcome once again to the New Way podcast, where we break down pop culture so you don't have to. I'm your host, Matt Schenk, joined in the studio by Mr. Benny Dubs.
Wow, you must have been listening to some early Monday morning AM radio.
That's right. And, of course, coming in from Los Angeles is Mr. Nick Santa Croce.
I think that call is the voice equivalent of tangy.
Tangy, oh,
Isn't it?
Yes, it is. Well done. No, we can't. I can't.
It's a bit tangy.
How
not
exhausting!
No, it's just a bit.
How
When you leaned
exhausting
in
is
the very
that?
beginning, it was subtle. It was a little more.
I was starting a little tangy, but then I went overboard.
It's not coming in hot. It's coming in like lukewarm.
It's exhausting. I doing that for even just like 30 seconds there was brutal. It's not enjoyable.
Welcome to my world.
I wonder how Paul Lend felt after 50 years.
The Lind is a little more fun.
I'm joking.
A little more fun, but yeah, that voice is rough.
Nick, you're still low.
Yeah, you are a little low, Nick.
Well, I've been saying for years to turn up my volume, Matt. So
No,
that's on you.
I'm in therapy. You need therapy.
Oh.
I meant volume,
Yeah, no,
but also that too. But
volume-wise. No,
also
volume-wise, you're a little
I
low.
turned you up some more. I don't know what's going on with the soundboard. It's been having some issues as of late. Maybe it is it's running its due time, but we're gonna power through it. That's why we're here for you. We have one of our, I call them sometimes lazy episodes. They're not really lazy.
I think you turned yourself up, Matt.
I turned you and me up as well, and Nick. So I apologize.
Well, then we're just back to where we started from. Now you're louder than me.
Now everything sounds okay.
I can hear you now.
Oh, you're compensating.
Oh
for my
God.
overly loud voice.
I've lost all control within 2 minutes of being on here, but we're gonna power through. So we are doing one of our Geek Speak episodes, and basically what that means is that we have.
He's not talking right now. I can't hear him at all.
Are you being
I'm kidding,
serious?
I'm kidding,
Oh
I'm
my
kidding,
God,
I'm kidding,
Nick! I'm gonna.
I like turtles.
Fucking. Oh my God. Anyway.
I'm sorry. I couldn't.
God.
Come on.
You almost made me do the Al Swearingen fucking. But all right, back to where we were. So we haven't been able to record as often this year due to many things, but also just giving us a little bit of time off and a little break from this. But we realize we miss a lot of kind of smaller conversations or little bits that we haven't gotten to over the last.
I thought you were going to say we missed each other. But
No, God, no. No. How do I mute you again? Where's your cough button? Okay, get him off.
Turn me up.
So there are a lot of things, and there's also just a ton going on there are two huge stories happening in film right now. One completely frivolous and one very serious. And there might be things I think maybe that our audience hasn't. If you're not like actively kind of watching for these things on TikTok, you may not know a lot about
Does
them.
the serious one involve Harry Styles?
No, that would be the frivolous one.
That's the TikTok.
That's the TikTok side, and the other side is one that we kind of started to almost talk about a few weeks ago. But there's some really great new perspective by someone who I'll give a shout out when we get to that. But before we get there. God, I totally had something I wanted to get into first, and it just jumped my brain. So Ben, I'm going to turn it.
Somebody die.
So many things that we have come
Yes.
out recently. I mean, obviously we have new Game of Thrones. We haven't really discussed. Obviously there's Lord of the Rings. Haven't really discussed.
Dragon Tits and Lord of the Dragon Tits.
Oh, okay.
That's what Matt refers.
Let's
to.
let's move on.
Yeah, continue. Well, it's actually Cockring, Lord of the Dragon Tits, but
No, I was trying to.
Cockle-doo!
Well,
you have Sylvester Stallone as a superhero finally, which is what we were all really, really hoping for.
oh yeah, that
He's
movie.
in Guardians. He's in the Ravagers.
He
It's
is,
true.
but he's
It's
in
true.
he's doing what's apparently a very terrible, terrible movie.
It's out. You can watch it now.
It's he just plays
Samaritan.
like a washed up superhero. But someone said that
It's like Hancock 2.
he's like legitimately taking us back to the 90s and Judge Dredd being the kind of comic book movies that are made, and that's the movie he's making. Like there's no influence of Marvel or even the parts of DC that are working.
I gotta tell you, man, that first Judge Dredd is such a fun guilty pleasure. It's so bad. It really is so bad, but it's so gloriously bad. Like
Yes.
just so many poor choices made in that movie. And Malcolm McDowell just trying to chew scenery, like chew his way out of every scene, is just so funny.
I've only seen the remake with Urban. That's the only one.
Oh,
I
you've
saw.
not
that
seen
movie's
the Stallone?
fucking
Yeah,
well,
that's
the
a
Urban
good
one's
movie.
awesome.
Yeah, that's a good movie. But the original Judge Dredd is is it terrible?
Wasn't the new one was written by Alex Garland?
Yeah,
I'm
and
pretty
the
sure.
director. The director
No
was
way.
Yeah, Alex Garland wrote that.
somebody
Whoa.
big directed it, or becoming big.
Yeah, it's like it's.
Well,
I
I
think
thought
it's
it
a
was
British
great,
guy.
but I had no idea.
It's
I had no idea.
Gareth something. I
Gareth
forget.
Edwards? No, it wasn't Gareth Edwards. But no, the new Dread was awesome. I still remember
The
somebody
Goblin King.
somebody told me about how good that was, and I managed to catch it in the theaters before it left. Or maybe I was just seeing what people were saying about it online. I think
Yeah.
it was that was back in the heyday of like when I was still on Rotten Tomatoes and stuff like that. So I'm sure somebody.
fairly positive you and I saw that together.
Maybe I saw it with you.
I'm fairly positive because we were comparing it a lot to The Raid. And
Yes,
I
it
remember
was.
talking
It
about
is
it
a lot
in the
like The
Boynton
Raid.
Theater. So let's before we get into kind of the crazier stuff, I'd like to kind of talk about Thrones and Lord of the Rings, because it is sort of one of these funny things where we find ourselves with two. It's fun. It's hard to call them.
Similar but dissimilar.
Yeah, they are similar, but they are completely different tonally. But you're essentially dealing with middle age time period in nondescript universes with magic and dragons and all kinds of shit. And they're very, very different in the way they're executed as well. But it is interesting to see us revisit two existing universes again at the same time, like on the television screen instead of in the movie theater. So Nick, have you watched any of Lord of the Rings?
I watched a little bit of it.
Okay. I'm somewhat similar. But
I need to go back in and finish it. I got distracted. I'm telling you what. I suck now watching TV. I feel like my brain has been completely rewired from my dependency on the phone, because I instinctually I'll just like reach for my phone to scroll mindlessly through Instagram or something when I've specifically sat down to watch a show, and then I realize for 10 minutes it's insane. Like, you get that problem?
TikTok.
I mean,
no,
I don't know if I can.
I don't have that problem. I really don't.
Ben is really good about that. It's one of the best things about watching stuff with Ben that we've said in here
Well,
before
if
is
I'm
that
with
it's.
if I'm with someone, it's completely different. But it left to my own devices in the prison of
literally your own devices.
I know that was a play on.
Okay, I'm just happy that the pun worked.
Ben wanted
Normally they don't.
people to know that he knew.
I knew
the amazing
that
pun
was
that
a
you
pun.
made. He wanted to really call that out. No, I think
Thank you, Ben. I thought
I
it was
want
pretty
them
good.
to know that I know that you know that I know it's good.
I
Yeah,
will.
that's good.
I'm guilty of pausing things. I don't
Yeah, you are.
miss things on when I'm watching them. Like if I'm watching something, I'm watching it, but I will pause. Oftentimes, it's to interact though with whatever I'm watching. I want to look up a cast member. I want to look up a director. I want to look up a cinematographer.
Just pauses when the tits are on screen.
And sometimes, yes.
Who is that actor?
I go the Mr. Skin route, and whose titty is that? I mean, listen. So let's also talk about the elephant in the room. The first the first Game of Thrones.
Oliphant in the room.
episode had a butthole in it. Did you guys see the butthole? Are you aware of the butthole, Ben?
No, I'm not aware of the butthole.
There is a butthole on screen in the orgies. You and your wife and I saw a butthole together in your house.
Oh, I didn't realize.
And we didn't realize it.
Well, I don't. No,
For the third time.
They really want me back, don't they? They're resorting to buttholes. But guess what? Guess what? Fuck you, Game of Thrones. I'm not coming back. Not for a butthole.
Not for a house of buttholes?
I want my butthole on a CGI Idris Elba as a cat. That's when I want my buttholes. You're not gonna seduce me.
I was just
back
about to make
into
a
the land
cat's
of ice and
joke.
fire. Well, you know what? It's not a joke to me, Ben. It's not a joke to me.
I'm enjoying the show so far, to an extent. I think that they've done a kind of good job of marrying some of the production value of the later episodes, regardless of what you may think of them, with some of the pacing and character development of the early seasons. It's a little uneven so far.
I definitely, I think each episode's gotten better than the previous episode. I thought the most recent episode for me was phenomenal. To me, it felt like taking a lot of really, really great things from the season.
I loved everything from The Hunt. I really did. All of the stuff with the crab feeder and all of the battle stuff, I felt was kind of like, it just was so kind of rashly explained. Mm-hmm. And I understand we're putting places and, what Damon did and all that. I understand why it was happening. But it felt like, hey, this is an episode where we have to have a battle. What can we do to make a battle?
Yeah, and
I'm afraid that Game of Thrones is pretty much now they're stuck in that in those concerns what the fans are going to say, because we still got the stink of the 8th season. There's a lot of pressure. If you don't think those new showrunners and that show and those actors feel an immense amount of pressure, specifically because of how the first Game of Thrones series ended, I got a bridge to tell you. They are going to feel like that.
Yeah, totally.
For every episode now, because they have to pay for the sins of their father, essentially. Every episode be double guessing, and that's why I kind of, obviously I'm already tuned out. I was forced to watch the pilot with my mother. I did that. I'd do anything for my mom, but after that I'm out. And I know it's rosy colored glasses, and really you shouldn't necessarily have to compare one show to another, but it's still Game of Thrones. It's still in the world. And one thing that I just couldn't shake is my memory of watching that first pilot of Game of Thrones and just being 10 minutes in, you're like, this is going to be my new favorite show. It doesn't have the magic. You have to have the built-in love for the whole world, and in many cases that includes that horrible 8th season to be invested.
Yeah, so I'm interested because there's something like kind of feel akin to that with Lord of the Rings a little bit as well. But I'll be honest, on the Game of Thrones front, Game of Thrones took me probably 5 seasons before I got excited to watch Game of Thrones each week. Like once they got up to season 5 and I started to kind of finally fucking understand, there's 50 dudes with beards in a castle here and there, and there's all these houses. I don't know any of this shit. The HBO had an app at that point. Their streaming app had like a whole guide thing and this is before I knew about kind of recaps and stuff, which I actively will use for kind of some of these difficult things. And also why I use the subtitles is I don't know, I can't tell, especially if a name doesn't sound maybe like it's spelled or vice versa. Like I need to see these things, but I never loved Game of Thrones immediately. So that's where I'm always a little torn when I hear people be like, oh, it doesn't have the like, can you remember that first season? I'm like, I really liked Tyrion, and I remember telling Ben that the 2 things I remember watching the pilot, I thought that Dinklage was amazing, and that Jaime Lannister trying to kill a kid, there's no way a character can be redeemed from an act like that in the first episode of a TV series. And those are the 2 things.
Okay, Matt. So you eventually got on board, right? And it eventually became event television for you. Now, is there any possible way you can distance yourself a little bit here. And is there any perspective that you could take where if you didn't eventually get into Game of Thrones, could you just start up with House of the Dragon? I mean, because I imagine there are people that haven't seen Game of Thrones that just start watching this, miss the boat, don't want to go back and watch every episode. It doesn't have, even if you weren't into Game of Thrones at the beginning, it doesn't have the same.
Nick, let me just tell you, though, that there are moments in the third episode that rival anything in the first 6 seasons of Game of Thrones. I mean that legitimately. I mean what I'm specifically talking about.
Episodes in, you have a connection.
I absolutely love this week's episode.
The whole
that's one thing.
The whole thing with Viserys and his breakdown. It was so interesting and so internal, and Patty Considine did such a fucking phenomenal job in this past week's episode. Because that was the thing, is the first 2 episodes I kind of agree with you, Nick, where I'm like, yeah, you're still feeling the baggage of the other show. It turned into something completely different in this episode. Now that's what I'm saying.
That's what it has to do. That's what Star Wars needs to do.
But no, it created a new type of character. Like, we're talking about the most reluctant type of king, the type of king that is now like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm supposed to do, but I care. Like, it's the exact polar opposite of Robert Baratheon in the first season.
And somebody, I forget who was on, someone on like on a chat board or something, basically said that his character is like a geeky loner that just wants to like play with his toys and his geeky histories and stuff. And he's found himself as a ruler of a kingdom, and he doesn't want to have to deal with anything that is not keeping the peace. Anything that's not keeping status quo, calm, nothing. We haven't been at war. Everything's good. That's his only goal. It's as far as any of his strategy goes, which is a great character to have in that universe when you know what has to have inevitably happened.
But who is
they also have to get rid of all the black people before the events of Game of Thrones happens 170 years later too. So
there's
the 5 black people in this they have to get rid of.
Right. Well, anyways, I mean, all I was saying is that the half of this past week's episode that dealt with the hunt and dealt with the king and with the royal family. All of that I thought was just perfect, exquisite, as good as anything the Game of Thrones has ever done. It's the other half, the battle and the stuff that they felt that's the stuff that kind of felt shoehorned, or felt like it should have been a more thoroughly developed thread. But I understand they're passing. The thing is Nick, you won't realize this since you're not watching the show, but there's like so much time passing in every single episode. Like I
do like,
and there's going to be a big time jump.
We're literally already like 6 years past. In the third episode, you're like 5 or 6 years past where the first episode is.
Well, I did find myself like trying to do the math, and I'm thinking like, how long till we get to the Mad King? How long do we get to Daenerys? They made the big deal of like that being the last word that fades out.
Yeah, 206 or 167 years, and then they said 300 at some point for something else. But yeah,
at any rate, like I didn't hate the first episode, and I kind of it clocked like a lot of pilots clocked. It's not the best pilot in the world, but it's setting up a lot, and they got to get through a lot of exposition, and it has a chance to be really good, and it looked really good, and no complaints, on my side really, but
on the looks really good side. Let's talk about Lord of the Rings.
Well, hold on. The analogy that I have for this, though, for me, what makes it so hard for me to get into this is I already have enough TV to commit to this. After my thoughts on the first series, it feels like the love of your life, who said like the worst thing they could possibly have said to you, broke your heart, broke up with you, and then gives you a really good present, a really nice, thoughtful present.
I thought you were going to say,
what am I supposed to do with this?
Imagine falling in love with somebody and being with them for 8 years, and the 8th year they just turn to a completely different person and they leave you, and then 4 years later they come back and they were like, "Hey, I may have been wrong, so maybe we should get back together."
Yeah. That's better. That's a better analogy.
But all those little things that annoyed you the first time, they're going to annoy you twice as much this time.
But you know what? And maybe that person is coming back with the best of intentions. Maybe they have changed. And maybe I need to give them a chance. But you know what? Because I was hurt and I'm stubborn, and I'm going to hold that grudge, and I'm going to say, "Fuck you."
You don't need to.
You had your chance,
You don't
baby.
need.
You had a chance of all this, baby.
No one needs to watch any. I think that's the other thing. Also, this idea of like
That's
obligation of being forced to watch shit. Like, I'm getting much more where I start to give up on certain things fairly quickly, because I'm just like, I don't want to. If I spend a season with it, I'll get roped in and I will try to struggle through.
Oh, I'm getting up halfway through so much shit
I'm
recently.
liking this. But yeah, I do want to talk about the visuals on it for just a second in relation to Lord of the Rings, because I watched 3/4 or so of the first episode of Lord of the Rings today. It looks as beautiful, if not, well, it looks better than The Hobbit, I will say, but it looks on par with the original trilogy of movies. And even though I know I don't remember a lot of like plots and stuff, I did recognize at least the couple of names that are thrown around I'm like, oh, I know that character is going to show up at some point later on. But to your point, Nick, it's also kind of one of those, like, I'll see how this plays out forward, because I really don't, I don't know the series that well, and it's a lot of minutia, which is sort of what you're dealing with Game of Thrones, is that if maybe you were a casual watcher of that and you kind of knew a couple of things, but you...
Here's the major irony of the Lord of the Rings show, is that you're saying there's all this minutia. Well, all this minutia is shit that they made up. It's not Tolkien lore. Because, for example, like the whole thing with Galadriel coming over from Valinor on the ships, like when the army starts, that's not what happens in Tolkien lore. She comes over later through the states of Donmere up north. She almost dies. But she never really fights.
Wait,
either.
is that by the cones of Dunshire?
Yes, exactly. But she never really even
That's
fights.
no Ben Wyatt energy here. I'm just saying.
She meets this guy named Celeborn, or come on, Celeborn. Anyway, she meets the guy who's in Lord of the Rings. Like when you meet Kate Blanchett in the Fellowship of the Ring, the dude that she is with in the Fellowship of the Ring, she meets that guy really young, and they get married.
Okay,
and so she's not fighting. So I'm assuming maybe that happens sometimes in the season. But she was never like a fighter. She was never somebody who was like running after Sauron or anything along those lines. This is all like completely brand new. They made this shit up, and it's not in the Tolkien canon anywhere. Well, what they're doing now is they're literally just making shit up within the world of Lord of the Rings, which is kind of weird.
It's also like, I'm doing a lot of
but that's what Dave Filoni did masterfully in Clone Wars, and then eventually brought it to the mainstream. And I kind of, sorry to cut you off, Matt, but like, I think that's the way to go now with these properties that have already kind of had their heyday and already built a fervent base of fans. You got to take the world and then keep the world, but introduce the new stuff. Get out of Luke Skywalker. Get out of Han Solo.
I 100% agree with you. The only problem with Lord of the Rings is that it's Galadriel, and Galadriel is a major character in the Lord of the Rings and in that universe.
Well, and Elrond, like, he shows up in the pilot.
No, Elrond's a huge character. He's one of the main characters of the show. So it's like very clear that they're like, oh, look at all of these ties back to the original series, but it has nothing to do with the books.
And there's something
I don't think prequels are necessarily a bad thing. Like, I love Rogue One. I think that actually really contributed a lot to classic Star Wars lore, but like, I think people have to move forward with these worlds.
Well,
the world's already been built, but let's move forward.
Except we had the greatest prequel series that has and probably ever will exist air this year and just finish up.
Anomaly.
And Nick and I kind of talked about this during a text thread.
No one else does it like Vince Gilligan.
But Better Call Saul does something that is that's sort of unheard of, in that it has its cake and eats it too, by allowing them to not technically know where they are going with the characters, or how they know where everything has to end up. But when they started Better Call Saul, they're like, oh, well, he's going to become Saul Goodman by the end of the first season, and then it's going to be like a procedural about him and his wacky cases and stuff. And then they wrote such a good backstory for him that they're like, we don't want to leave the Jimmy character. So the show became about him and Kim. And Kim was not supposed to be a major character, but like they fell into all of these things where they were not afraid to pivot, but still be meticulous and find the ways to tie in those, the Easter eggs for the fans. And then by the end of it, it is interesting. I wonder, when we talk about if you're going to watch something without watching, the ancillary property or whatever kind of birthed it, can you watch Better Call Saul without watching Breaking Bad? And I say for all but the last handful of episodes, yes. I think you could watch it and find it to be a story, and you're going to miss Easter eggs and stuff, but it can stand on its own.
Though it's not a plot wise. You could watch Better Call Saul and it's.
That's what
you'd be like, who's that bald guy?
I'm saying up until the resolution is too tied to it because it has to be. Like there is really no way to have that resolution not be tied to it. So they do a decent job. But I am curious if I'd love to see someone watch Better Call Saul without knowing Breaking Bad and say what was this experience like to watch that, and then to watch Breaking Bad and be like, holy shit.
Yeah.
Because
that's the definition of a meaningful prequel or sequel. It's when it makes the original source material better having been made, right? And you can't say that a lot for Star Wars. You can't say that a lot for a lot of things that come out. But
I'm listening to you guys saying that. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Nick, sorry to cut you off. All I was going to say is that I don't think that Breaking Bad exists in the same context without.
Exactly.
Or the Better Call Saul exists in the same context without Breaking Bad. I don't think it's as necessarily as impactful of a show.
Sure.
But that's the nature of it, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's also
the big difference is not only you got the Vince Gilligan difference, number one difference. He's just kind of built different as a show. Now he's not showrunner of Better Call Saul, but just as an architect, right? Like as a Feige. It's very, very few guys have that attention to detail and love for the characters and will to just show them off right. But on top of that, it's also a realistic world. It's not Middle Earth. It's not in space. It's not large-scale world building. It's our world. And if you were to
Albuquerque meth scene, that's a lot of world building right there.
If you were to drop off any of the characters in different spots in the U.S., which they end up doing in the plot quite frequently, as a standalone, right? It's not like you wouldn't go, oh yeah, that's you see a Cinnabon. And you're like, oh, that's the Breaking Bad-verse. So clearly, right? but they don't have the luxury. They could do a prequel because it's always going to be intertwined with the plot of the original property, right? But with Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, we're talking about big, giant fantasy worlds that have already been kind of built and realized, right? My question is, why go backwards when the bricks have been laid, right? Why do we always need to go back, or even when we're doing sequels, bring back all the same characters? And there's plenty to go off of. Patrick came over last week, and we hung out and watched some of Clone Wars. And I need to watch the whole series, but he showed me a few episodes, and we watched this 10-minute. This is what you missed in the series, and it's just such a great example of, the world's already been built, but let's introduce new characters that feel right in the context of the world. And that's what Filoni did so well. And that's why I feel like everything that he's working with in live action Disney Plus Star Wars series is really working, because we're going to see Luke. Yeah, we're still getting some of those old characters, but it's working towards, basically the fan fiction that he got made into a cartoon, but brand new characters, but all working together. And that's kind of, it's not necessarily a formula. It's still a lot of work. You have to have the right people involved, but that's the direction that I feel like.
But that's, I don't understand though, but that is looking backwards. It's basically, it's giving color to to the world that I'm the other way of it, that if you're going to prequels, I don't mind.
I read the Star Wars books when I was in middle school. So
yeah, my problem typically is with the movies they make that are continuing in the universe and that are not, they're
not necessary.
That don't need to, I don't need to have the further adventures of Luke Skywalker. I don't mind going back and visiting, but that's a sequel versus looking at a prequel of which of those two things do you prefer? I like the prequel. I love something like Better Call Saul that's going to allow me to then revisit, like Rogue One. Rogue One for me is a great example. I know not everyone is like as gung-ho on Rogue One. Rogue One is easily my favorite of any of the new Star Wars films that have come out past the original trilogy. And I think watching that and then going into A New Hope gives you so much baggage that carries with it into that movie in such a satisfying way of like, now why Vader is so fucking pissed when he gets on that ship.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, but
it was impactful, right? But when you look back at like, to me, I'm not saying it's not worth it, or they're not always, prequels aren't always good, or sequels aren't always good. Obviously, there are good sequels and there are good prequels. But I think that when you have these big ticket franchises in these big time fantasy worlds, there's this hesitation to falter too much from the formula and lean on the old characters and events from 20, 30 years ago when they could just be starting new. It's like you played The Sims in middle school and you get the brand new Sims, right? It's still the Sims world. You don't go back and recreate all the characters you made when you were in 5th grade. You take everything that happened leading up to the new Sims and make new characters.
Apparently we don't play The Sims the same way.
I'm still confused. I am honestly just sort of confused. I'm confused
as to your. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah, no, but you're saying you don't like.
I just realized I'm wearing a Mandalorian shirt.
No, but I don't understand which side of.
I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back to Filoni to hone this, and I'll make it short. Filoni is a fan of Star Wars, right? And you could tell everything he does he's got this just voracious love for Star Wars. Came up in the ranks, started doing a cartoon, that wasn't really connected to Star Wars.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I kind of want to get to what is the convert, what are you sorry? Not, it sounds to me like you don't mind prequels as long as they're done well, which I completely agree with. But so the House of the Dragons is exactly what you're describing. It is characters that are not they're in the same family the same way as
I'm tainted. I want to stay away from Game of Thrones because it's not a good.
But you can also say Lord of the Rings. We're talking about characters that
Lord of the
knows.
Rings is another one that does have.
Is a better example. I don't have the baggage from the movies because I enjoyed the movies. The problem is I didn't love the movies. I'm not a super fan, so I'm going to be more open to changes, and prequels are more difficult without that built-in love, right? All I'm saying is. This is true for anything. Look, anything can be good if you make it well. Anything can be good. A superhero film can transcend the tropes and really say something and really be amazing if you do it well, right? But I just think that prequels, generally speaking, and sequels use too many crutches. They lean on characters and events that have happened instead of just creating new stories with new characters within the world that don't necessarily have any connection to the events that made the original.
And I think those
popular.
are fine too. I think it's. Just,
I would like to see the shift to that methodology.
But then we move. But then we lose Clone Wars. We lose Better Call Saul. We lose these good examples of that are that it is that they're looking. They are relying 100% on recognition.
I'm using Clone Wars as an example of not necessarily being pigeonholed into. And if you watch it, I think you'd understand, Matt.
I've watched 25 episodes of it, but it's 100%. You're dealing with but it's completely relying on a period of time exists in that universe. I don't understand the anti-argument of what this is, because I think you're just again it's. Clone Wars 100% leans on the fact that it is Star Wars. You have Anakin Skywalker and his Padawan, who you don't know, which I like. All of those, I think it completely comes to how are they coloring and filling in things. I love that we have this character in the Clone Wars of Ahsoka, and we have this whole relationship with this person and Anakin that we never see in the movies, but you can go and watch those movies and it's not out of place where it slots in terms of that story, and it makes you kind of also appreciate things that Lucas didn't do a great job of, because I think that's sometimes the most interesting thing with filling these things that retcon it enough that it makes stuff better. To the idea that we did not get a satisfying arc for Anakin Skywalker in those 3 movies. But the Clone Wars can spend 125 episodes just chipping away at that story and give us something more interesting.
And Better Call Saul does that as well. I
Same.
guess the best way for me to explain this is I use Clone Wars as an example of building off the mythology in a distinct way that doesn't feel like a crutch, because obviously it happens during events of Star Wars during the Clone Wars that we don't get to focus on, and that we're just like thrown into hit the ground running in those Lucas prequels, right? But I just think it's a master class in taking the world and expanding on it rather than just leaning on it. And I know that might be vague, and maybe that's more instinctual and emotional, but there's a difference for me, and I can always tell.
Yeah, I think there are lots of people doing it well though right now, which I think it's you're always going to deal with that package. But let's forge forward here, because I do want to talk about the two bigger stories that are kind of happening.
The only thing I got from that entire conversation is that Nick told me that Los Pollos Hermanos is a real place, because apparently Better Call Saul exists in the real world.
It is in the real. You can go visit that.
I'm gonna eat that fucking chicken, man.
And you can throw pizzas
I
on the
went
roof.
to a pop up in L.A. It can exist.
There are, by the way, what is funny though, no matter how vanilla that world building might seem, the people that are really into that shit are like, they call it's the Gilligan verse. And then there's a lot of people right now with now that we've gotten through the end of Better Call Saul saying Saul is actually the central character of the Breaking Bad universe.
No way.
Yes, and it actually tracks. Nothing happens in either of the series without Jimmy McGill.
I'm just
Well,
waiting.
he even says that in the climactic,
Yes.
finale.
I'm just waiting for the X-Files Breaking Bad crossover.
I would, God, how fucking great would that be for Mulder and Scully to be in Albuquerque trying to figure out like some haunted thing? It just turns out it's meth. It's just a guy on meth. And you're like, oh, it's just a meth. That guy's got meth mouth, and that's all it is. That would be amazing.
The Gilligan world building reminds me of like the Tarantino world building. It's our world. It's realistic, but like they're very distinct. It's very distinctly in that.
It's
that
no
world.
View-esque universe, which I'm so excited to get a new Clerks movie in a week. But moving on to these news stories, because I really do, I do think there are probably a lot of people listening to us that are like that maybe like this and they like pop culture, but they're not tuned to this side of pop culture. And one of these is fun. Let's save that one for the end. Let's slog through the harder one right now, because we've talked a lot on the show about the future of cinema and what's going on. And there was a big shakeup recently with Warner Brothers as the parent company and Warner Brothers Discovery basically taking everything under the umbrella there, including HBO Max, mainly HBO Max as a streaming platform, and trying to merge it with its own platform, Discovery Plus, as one thing. This, by the way, just so everyone knows, this is separate from HBO, the network. And I think that's one thing that is a little bit confusing in a lot of this, is people are like, oh, is this going to affect, House of Dragons? No, House of Dragons is in the HBO world.
You can still watch Hard Knocks.
Yeah, you can still get Entourage at some point again, but like this is mainly the streaming platform. And Nick sent me this amazing tweet feed by this person. She goes at G Von Joy. Her name is V for Vendetta. I did think this was going to be just a hit piece on Vince Vaughn, but I was sorely mistaken when Nick sent this to me.
that wouldn't be super out of character.
It
for
would
Nick.
not. In fact, that was my main assumption. I was like, oh God, I don't know what I'm about to read here, but it's going to be bad.
I take every opportunity not to bring up Vince Vaughn, to be fair.
I've noticed that. You've done well to refrain.
But yeah, and so that means like there are certain things on HBO Max that are going to be at risk, that are prestige. I would say Hacks is number one among them, which has got huge Emmy buzz, but that's something that doesn't exist on HBO proper. Although The Rehearsal, Nathan Fielder's show, does, and it got renewed for a second season, which is still boggles my mind. But moving on,
Like
with
that
this,
should probably be a one season show and come up with something else. I don't know what he's gonna do.
The show is so bizarre.
So good.
So basically, this merger really presented itself to the public because the first thing that they did when they merged these channels is they canceled a bunch of properties, some of which were complete. And the most visible of these was the Batgirl movie that they've been working on. A DC universe film. They were bringing back Michael Keaton as Batman in it. A fairly big film for them. And this movie, literally, they locked the directors out of the editing bay, basically, or their digital codes of the bay, and told them, like, just overnight, hey, stop editing the movie. It's done. It's gone. It will never air. It will never be seen. Basically, because of a tax break that they got, that they felt financially they were going to lose less money by shelving a $80 million budgeted
90.
Yeah, it went over with COVID reshoots. So 90 mil. They basically, we lose less by just shelving that and
basically, a lot of the industry had already started to kind of. I mean, Netflix is its own beast, right? But we always hear these stories. They continue to churn out content, big names, big stars, big movies. But then there's always articles about how they're like clinging on, how they could have survived it, right? And people were wondering, for subscriptions, and this is why Stranger Things was criticized how they rolled it out. Netflix's model is the binge model. That's how they became famous. You sit down, you watch an entire series in one sitting, and that kind of became synonymous with Netflix. And when you have something with a company that sets you apart from something else, you lean in. Problem is, over the years, we're starting to learn that streaming, big budget streaming movies, just don't bring in revenue like going to the theater. A couple months ago, we thought, is theater dead, right? And then a couple months, so much changed as people started going back, because you're realizing you're getting ticket sales for every person in a seat. You do have people sharing passwords. You have people just like sitting down on the couch. It's all about subscriptions. And to get subscriptions, you need to have something constantly looking forward to. People will just go in, they'll buy a month, and they'll cancel once they've seen everything. And that's kind of what this streaming model for films is going to go the way of the dodo. They just don't. No matter how big you are, you're just not going to make the same amount of money you'd make if you had a theatrical release. Period. And so it's interesting.
Yeah, even just this week, Paramount announced that they were pivoting back towards trying to exclusively focus on theatrical releases.
Well, and so this is what we see kind of on the surface happening right now, and this idea of, but there's this shift. The main shift happened really in the last couple of weeks, and the reason is fleshed out by this writer, and I'm gonna try to get this down to kind of the Cliff's Notes version. I do recommend you go and read this on there. If you can't find it, go to Patton Oswalt. He shared it. Like, a bunch of people are sharing this. It's really, really phenomenal. Again, at G Von Joy on Twitter. So basically, to explain what is happening immediately right now, it ties back into the original 5 studios that existed, and we're now getting into Ben realm of film history. So I am nervously, I can see Ben in my periphery, and I feel like I'm doing a book report that if I get it wrong, the teacher is going to be very upset. But
the first studio was TKO.
So the 5 studios were
RKO,
Universal.
I know.
It was MGM, 20th Century Fox, RKO, WB, and Paramount. Currently, we have 5 major studios that are not the same as those, at least not all of them. You've got Universal, you've got Paramount, you've got Warner Brothers, you've got Disney, and you've got Columbia. So the question is asked, what happened with this old studio system? And it all ties into there's a lot of shit that happened with RKO and why RKO basically went under as a studio in 1959. There's shit with Howard Hughes. There's shit with basically eating themselves alive as a studio with people that didn't understand creative or anything. You've just got a crazy billionaire that wants to own a movie studio. So at the same point, the Supreme Court makes a decision in a thing called the Hollywood Antitrust Case of 1948. And basically, they were trying to make it so that we can't have what you see right now, where you have these with people gobbling up and trying to own all of the content. Back then, the way that manifested the most was that a studio couldn't buy a theater chain and show only their pictures in that, and then charge other filmmakers and other studios exorbitant fees.
So that's what was happening pre 1948. Is that the actual studios had controlling stakes in the theater chains, and so these theaters basically they would go in and they would pay the theaters, and a lot of times there was a lot of also kind of like very mob-ish business that was going on where they were paying theater chains to only play a certain studio's money, and it got real dirty. Well, anyways, of course that escalated, and because they were like, well, if they're not going to show it, we're just going to buy the theater chain. Well, then the Supreme Court hopped in and they said, nope, antitrust, you can't do that. This has to be basically the same thing as like a 3-tier system.
Yeah.
We're going to have to set up a tiered system where you're going to have the actual person that's producing the piece of media, the person who's distributing the piece of media, and the person who's exhibiting the piece of media. And these three have to be completely bifurcated. They have no ability to hold stake in one another. And that's what happened back then.
Gotcha. All right. So why is this important now basically comes to a head in 2 years ago. August of 2020, the Supreme Court overturns or disbands this system and basically says there's a 2-year grace period before it actually goes into effect. But we are saying as of August 2020, we are getting rid of this decision. We're reversing this decision.
You know what? Hot take for you. Hot take.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of the Supreme Court's work in the past few years. Not a fan.
I mean, this is the most egregious thing they could have done this year, for sure. But anyway, moving smoothly along. All right, so that was 2 years ago. We get to August of 2022 once this is now in effect, and now this is what's happening. This craziness that's happening with these studios. Basically, what's happening with Warner Brothers is what happened with RKO, and they're basically the theory is that it's going to literally just consume itself to the point at which the studio no longer exists in the way that it does right now, which is fucking insane. That's the reason why it would happen.
Sort of like Sega lost to Nintendo, and now they only make games. They don't make consoles anymore. They still exist, but it's a completely different company.
So here's the interesting thing, though. The RKO actually ended up folding about 10 years after that. The reason why they folded as a studio is because they had an inability to adapt. All of those studios continued to have successes and ended up matriculating into other companies or the growth of other companies then caused those companies to then merge with other companies. RKO is sort of an aberration, and I think it's kind of an interesting thing that it's even brought up there. All it stands is that it was a major studio in the 1930s and 40s, and that's the reason why.
Yeah, I think the tie, or at least the correlation that I think she was making was basically that the people that are running it at this time without these limitations are just fuck it.
So you could make the correlation that the people who are running Warner Brothers, or the people who are running especially some of the subsidiaries of Warner Brothers like DC or whatever, don't know what the fuck they're doing, which is perfectly rational. Yeah. I mean, if you look at DC's track record over the last fucking 15 years, it doesn't look like they know what the fuck they're doing. But I still think it's a way different thing that's happening now than what was happening.
I'm sorry. Every single time I see RKO, you know what I think of first? The first thing I think of.
What?
the photoshopped Orson Welles Peeps ad.
Oh yeah, of course.
When the desire for mallow-based confection prevails, I must insist upon Peeps.
Oh Lord!
Isn't that a play on the wine thing?
Yes, it's that he also does it. There's another great Orson Welles bit on The Critic where he's selling the peas full of frozen goodness and green penis. That's disgusting.
Hey man, at the end of his career, Orson Welles had to eat.
He ate quite a bit. So
there's another Photoshop thing for him hawking a cereal for Honeycomb. I'm a big director and I want a big cereal.
You say you can't get through a movie without being on your device, Nick. Tell us more about that. Nick is
God.
memeing during the our broadcast here.
There's so many Orson Welles sells products memes that I didn't know existed until just now.
Oh, I mean the actual commercials,
He's
outtakes are the greatest anyway.
He's going down the rabbit hole.
Oh, he is the Orson Welles rabbit hole.
I'm back.
So anyway, it is kind of crazy, and what was really interesting about this is that this. So it kind of sounds like we had a good thing, and then that thing was taken away, and it is true, except that the thing needed to be fixed, and that's the reason that when basically SCOTUS didn't really care about diving deeper into what this all means, because the idea is that the agreement was built between 5 studios that don't exist if at all, or in completely different ways as they do now. There was no streaming. There's something needs to be happening right now, because it is getting to where Disney is going to just keep gobbling.
And it will. That's the thing, is it will eventually. I mean, it is incompetent as maybe, that, branch of government might currently be. This is the type of thing when there's that much money at stake and that much money to be made. This is the type of thing where pressures mount and things are going to change.
Matt, what did it say on there? How much did Disney buy 20th Century Fox for? Like 120 billion or something?
No, it was like 60 billion.
Yeah, it was a
and then
or 80 billion.
Someone bought MGM for 8 billion.
8 billion.
A song.
Oh, it was Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos bought it for 8 million.
That's right. That's right. And in the tweets, like that's Bezos, almost literally Bezos.
Disney bought 20th Century Fox. Disney bought Fox for $71.3 billion in 2019. Amazon bought MGM for $8.5 billion in 2022.
MGM, 8.5. Then it's the whole every property, just it's crazy that could happen. It really is. It really is crazy when you think about it.
Yep. Even though it's still monopoly money, but
yeah.
It's I don't know why. Just now you put me on a tangent, but for the MGM when Louis C.K. was making what the hell's the Chris Rock movie Pootie Tang. He had to meet. We were doing it for MGM, and he had to meet with someone from the studio, and he's like, your last name's Mayer, no? He's like, yeah, I'm the grandson of Louis B. Mayer, and he had to basically explain Pootie Tang to the studio of MGM, which is a bizarre fucking story, but very funny.
Which is actually,
and you guys want to see me masturbate?
That is how it did end. It did end that way,
and then he just did.
Ironically, Pootie Tang was actually quite popular among my high school friend group.
Oh, mine too. I am a big Pootie Tang fan, and there are listeners out there that are into it.
In high school, we quoted Pootie Tang quite a bit.
I'm gonna sign my pity on the runny kind.
Add this to the drinking game. Every time you hear the word Tang.
Yeah, we hit a lot of tangy at the start.
Just stay away from this episode.
All right, so in our last few minutes of the podcast, we have to discuss what is. I'm with you, Nick.
What is love?
It is the dumbest story to be caught up in, and I am 100% watching every moment of it. So,
I just want to say one thing before you set it up. On the surface, a lot of it is really just tabloid fodder. We've seen this type of feud before, but when you really dive in, it's a lot deeper. It's a lot deeper on many levels, I think. But please.
Yeah, there's so the controversy right now is about a film called Don't Worry, Darling. It's directed by Olivia Wilde. She's an actress you have seen in several things. She turned director with the movie Booksmart, which is a fucking
excellent film.
Great fucking movie. So she kind of became a hot commodity. She was, at the time that this movie was greenlit, she was married to Jason Sudeikis, who was having his own successful track going into Ted Lasso.
She was getting attached to a unnamed major Marvel property. Some thought it was Spider-Woman, but she was getting serious traction. She could have done whatever she wanted, an art house film, a super. She was kind of just positioning to really break out after Booksmart.
Yeah, and this all happens right at the height of COVID as well. The story starts. It goes all the way back into 2020 when this was originally caught. And the original casting was Florence Pugh, Shia LaBeouf, Chris Pine, and then minor roles Nick Kroll and Gemma Chan are in it as well. The trailer, by the way, looks fucking amazing. I was super into the trailer before all of this shit happened. The movie looks very interesting. Seems like it's some kind of psychosexual thriller.
It's a dystopian kind of.
That and Wakanda Forever are my favorite trailers that I've seen recently.
Those are two really good fucking trailers. And so the movie goes into production. While in production, Olivia Wilde and Jason Sudeikis, not so quietly, but not crazily, wind up getting separated. At the same time, Olivia Wilde starts shacking up with Harry Styles.
And we don't really know the timeline.
We don't know the timeline of that.
We don't really know.
And these are the more salacious parts of it. I promise where it goes gets so more bizarre and more interesting. So while this separation is happening, and the reason why Harry Styles is brought in the movie is Harry Styles is brought in to replace Shia LaBeouf. And the official answer at that time was that it was a scheduling conflict. And that was it. The movie goes and shoots. It has this trailer come out. The trailer looks great. Everyone's like, it looks interesting and mysterious and
this is
awesome.
Going to be a contender.
And Florence Pugh is just like, everything she's doing is golden. So everyone's like, yeah, this is going to be great. And then a few pieces of news come out. First is a Vanity Fair piece with Olivia Wilde, where she basically kind of, I hate to use this term, but kind of white knights herself, saying that she got rid of the reason why Shia LaBeouf is no longer on the film it wasn't scheduling. She feared for her lead actress, Florence Pugh's safety, because Shia LaBeouf was unhinged. During this,
and also it's worth mentioning, Matt, if you've read FKA Twigg's her allegations against Shia LaBeouf, who he was dating at the time, it's real bad.
Yeah. It's
not like Chris Brown, Rihanna bad, but it is not good. It is scary. It is harrowing, and I just that's important. It's an important part of this story is that Shia is trying to come back, and he has taken, to be fair, taken a lot of accountability, but trying to mount this comeback. But like, it is important to know
he's done lots of good shit too in the last few years. Yeah,
but like the allegations from FKA Twigs are absolutely horrible.
And
if I was on a set, if I was a woman on a set with him, I absolutely would be, a little uneasy.
So yeah, there was a believability. No one really batted an eye when this came out, right? The story comes out, and everyone's kind of like, yeah, well, Shia LaBeouf was, kind of like crazy at that time. It was right when he was getting sober. I mean, it's a big part of it is that his AA treatment stuff started like right when that movie fell through. So all of this is kind of happening. And the only other thing, there's one other small element that is going on during this. When that trailer launches, some of the cast is kind of tweeting, here's the trailer, check this stuff out. Everyone's talking about the trailer except for Florence Pugh, the star of the movie. And she's tweeting the Oppenheimer trailer. Like, they came out around the same time, and her, like, only acknowledgement of anything, and this is before any of the main shit happens. This is, like, right when the trailer comes out. People were talking about this a couple of months ago, being like, was there something going on the set? Like, Florence Pugh, it became a running gag that she kept sharing trailers for other movies, things like she wasn't involved with or related to, but not the Don't Worry, Darling. So
did you see the meme of George Costanza? I'm worrying, darling. I'm worrying.
So where this is all going is that the movie is coming up to a premiere, which just happened at the Venice Film Festival, and right on the heels of that happening, we get the other side of the story from Shia LaBeouf. Shia LaBeouf not only refutes things, he also shares text messages that basically say that there was not a scheduling conflict. He talked about exactly what was going on, and then there was this kind of shadiness with Olivia Wilde where she calls Florence Pugh Miss Flo, like kind of like derogatorily in this chat message that she has with LaBeouf, but basically saying like you know how she gets, don't worry about it, come back to the production. So it's very clear that the what was happening on set or during rehearsals with Shia LaBeouf and with Florence Pugh and with Olivia Wilde, nobody is on the same page as to what exactly was happening there. And it doesn't sound great for Olivia Wilde. And it's kind of one of those sad things that she almost could have gotten away with it, basically because what we just said. Those
damn kids.
The allegations against him didn't seem out of character for him at that time. So the movie now comes out, and you've got this weird premiere at the Venice Film Festival where everyone eventually shows up. Like Florence Pugh did not want to do press. She eventually comes out and does this and gets out on the carpet.
Well, she did the red carpet and she did the premiere, but she absolutely skipped the press.
The Q&A.
At one point, a reporter asked Olivia Wilde point blank, can you clear the air? Can you address this? Is there a grudge? And she had nothing but glowing things to say about her, and she ended with when the first thing I heard, I just winced. And she said, the internet is feeding itself, and I don't feel the need to contribute to any more rumors. And I was like,
That's what Olivia Wilde said, not Florence Pugh.
And no, Florence Pugh wasn't. She specifically skipped.
Right. That was her
point.
response to what's going on. Yeah.
And like, while that is honestly, it's a perfectly fine answer, but it's not a good look. It is not a good look.
Yeah, it is a crazy story, and it's also one of those that now you've got this movie, and this happens a lot of times in film. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that the real issue, the only I think, so a lot happens on the film set. First off, and I have no idea what happened in this case, and I'm not sure what sort of improprieties happened, and I know that there's some sort of allegations that Florence Pugh thought was completely unprofessional for Olivia Wilde to hire Harry Styles, with whom she was having a relationship, and that was sort of
and doing intimate scenes with him, and
she's also very good friends. I think through Zach Braff in the comedy world, she had a friend who was very good friends with Sudeikis. So there's also
that I didn't know. So that's interesting.
That perhaps she had more of a insider's track on this so-called timeline, right? Now, and the thing is, and what I try to stay away from is we really can't judge other people until we know all the facts, and we'll never know everything about this, as we shouldn't. It's people's personal business, right? But when you're talking about a film that Florence Pugh was obviously very excited about, and all these interviews of her talking about how much she wanted to work with Olivia Wilde started resurfacing, and clearly she was very, very excited, and she delivered a performance that pretty much is the only universal praise for this movie, is that she knocks it out of the park, right? But what we know is something's going on. Their interpersonal friend groups mingled. That was just on the cherry on top of everything else. Pugh, I think, is pretty much proven that she missed rehearsals for good reasons, but was missing rehearsals. So that definitely tracks for Shia. But when they said that he had combative energy, that's more of the more recent spin on why they want to get rid of him. And you look at those texts that leak between him and Florence Pugh, and everyone seems to say, they were sending each other songs and photos of her dog, and see, they're on good terms. But you know what? When I read those texts, I see the combative. It's clear as day to me, and no one seems to be talking about it. For me, if I'm Florence Pugh and I've been looking forward to being on this movie, working with someone specifically that I've been looking forward to, with a chance to flex my muscle and maybe get up for an Oscar, you don't want to leave that project. But when you find out that somebody like Shia LaBeouf is attached to it, you don't want him to think you're scared of him. You don't want anyone to think that you're scared, that you don't want. When you're looking at these studio films, a lot of times, for whatever reason, the studio bigwigs really want a certain actor in place, and you kind of, if you got a beef or like, you just go with it, and that's normally the extent of it. There's actors that beef, they get through it, and then they don't ever work with each other again. There's plenty of cases like that you point to, right? I think there's no reason why
Tom Hardy and Charlize Theron.
Yeah, right. That's a great example, right? But like,
Or
they
George
made a great
Clooney
movie.
and David O. Russell.
Yeah, and but the thing is, they all made good movies together, and they moved on. That's usually the extent of this type of drama, right? But this just keeps continually to compound.
Well, I think this is
feel
all
for everyone.
Go ahead, Ben.
Also, so here's the point I was trying to make earlier. So Olivia Wilde had set it up like this whole movie was set up so nicely for her because she was on such a hot streak, and then she got such, I guess, tons of media love when the whole shit happened where she got served while she was like doing a fucking presentation.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
like everyone was like on Olivia Wilde's side. That Vanity Fair article telling somebody how important your movie is, why you should go see a movie, why it's so important, is a fucking bullshit thing to do as a director. I think it's fucking immature. I think it showed the fact that she was she is inexperienced and terrible at dealing with the media in a way. She could be a fantastic director. I love Olivia Wilde. I've always been on Olivia Wilde's side. And I've always loved her as an actress, and I loved Booksmart, and I will see her new movie. But that interview is fucking egregiously bad. It's so, and I don't know if it was contextualized poorly, but it's when exactly what Matt said, when you white knight yourself. And then you talk about why your movie, and I'm not talking about just those parts. I'm talking about what you're talking about, why your movie is important and why it should be seen. That's fucking stupid shit. Come on, man. Like, don't do that. Let the movie speak for itself. Talk about the experience. Talk about the actors. Talk about the stuff that you were trying to do or the stuff that you were trying to convey. Don't talk about why your movie is important. That's stupid. It's fucking stupid because it puts you on a pedestal where you can be fucking shot down. That's what started everything. That's literally what started this whole cacophony of shit. And so I love Olivia Wilde.
It feels like you kind of, she was feeling really good. She's feeling on top of the world, like you said. All this momentum is building. Everyone's on her side.
She made a mistake.
It's sort of like
she made a mistake.
It's sort of like, honestly, it's sort of like just this Trumpian, like, I'm bulletproof. I don't know how you can just say like, oh yeah, I matter of factly, like, I fired Shia because I was concerned for the safety of my actors, and not think that Shia would have anything to say about that, or perhaps any receipts.
There's a lot of hubris involved in it, and I do honestly, I think she thought she could get away with it. I think that she thought this was like I'm gonna drum. I think in her mind, she's fighting this image of how much, like, you talk about riding that high, right? And there's only one direction you can go once you hit that top, and it is going to be down, and it depends on how fast and how steep that goes. But for her, she's got all of the stress of the movie was really coming down to Harry Styles, the fact that they have this relationship that seems to have happened. When did it happen? Is it, was he cast because they were sleeping together? Is that why? Like, so I think in her head, she's like, I'm going to get out in front of this, and I'm going to make me look so fucking good on this. So, like, of course I had to cast Harry because he's trustworthy and calm. And of course, I'll say this about Shia. People say shit about Shia LaBeouf all the time. I think she thought, and I don't know that I think there's a day that happens and Shia just says, fuck it, I don't care, I'm focusing on my thing. And there's a day where he's like, I'm fighting back.
I'm not willing to presuppose what she was thinking. All I'm saying is that she made a mistake. Like, what she did was bad. And
you can't put yourself in her head, but you can objectively say, like, that's not a smart move. And if I am, if I was to try to put myself in her head, you got to think about what she's going through. She's going through an ugly divorce where she's getting served while she's promoting the film. I don't know what happened between her and Jason Sudeikis, but he is riding high, and not just riding high, but on the wings of a character that is, pristine, squeaky clean, feel good guy. So
also a character she helped him develop and push to develop into a series, which is also real fucking crazy.
That's and Matt, that's exactly what I talk about when I think about like the wrinkles, right? So as this is all happening, as her personal life is really stressful, she has a movie that she's proud of, and that I think maybe she just leans all in on that. That's the one thing that's going right. So she is feeling good, and she, because she has to feel good. That's what's going well. So she kind of does this interview or whatever, and I think maybe it's coming from just I'm a proud place, right? I think that to look at the whole picture, there's a lot going on, and who knows if you know, Hugh started acting, and maybe she had a thing for Harry Styles. He's a charming man.
Did you guys see the trailer for My Policeman?
I heard about it.
It came out today.
Yeah.
Harry Styles' other high profile.
I wonder how fast they were like, get a fucking cut of that trailer out now.
Get that trailer out now. Well, because people have talked about it being an awards contender, and you know, when you have a three-way,
they're all
male, female.
Guys, they're all. It's the fucking cabal. It is the Illuminati. They are all in it. They are all working together. This is what's happening right now.
Yeah, but it was the timing was great because the trailer came out today or yesterday. I think.
Found it when I was looking for something else about this story, and I was like, oh, of course, they're gonna do this. It's fucking phenomenal.
I mean, it looks like a very good movie. It looks like
I hope, despite all the controversy, I hope no one spits on it. You know,
I really want to see the movie. Look up the whole spitting thing.
I didn't love the trailer actually. I know you guys said the guy said you love the trailer. I was like, I feel like the trailer gave way too much away. I would have preferred something a lot more Jordan Peele-ish. Let me put it that way.
True. Nobody does it quite as well as he does in that regard. God, there are like 1,000 more things I wanted to get to.
One last thing I will say. I think that, you know, that Nixon, like, mistakes were made. I do genuinely feel bad for everybody involved, probably a little less for Shia. I don't blame him for sticking up for himself, but it's a bad situation all the way around. You got a great cast. You got Nick Kroll, you got Chris Pine. They're also suffering the collateral damage of this. I've had people who have personally worked with you know, a lot of these people, including Olivia, and have really good things to say about her, and that means something to me. That means something to me personally. That's real currency. But that being said, man, it does not look good. It does not look good from the outside. And
well, I think Ben also
the fact that the movie isn't getting reviewed very well either is just I can't imagine. I watched these videos of Olivia Wilde doing the parties in Venice and just kind of just out. And normally it's like on TikTok and it's just with a song in the background or whatever, and she's not talking or anything, and you just look in her eyes and you could just see that she wanted this to be an amazing moment, and I think in her head she thought this was going to be a great experience, but she just internally screaming. Well, Ben, every shot I see of her and like half the cast.
Ben, I think you hit even closer to it probably with this. Is this this is a Dear Evan Hansen deal where like she did one thing and she fucked it up, and then she's so bad at this. She's so bad at this. She just fucking like keeps piling and doubling down. And now she's in so fucking deep that of course like she's got to win one of these, right? Just keep fucking gambling away. So yeah, I think that you really do get that idea of kind of immaturity of someone, and I think that's something that's interesting because I do on our next episode I really want to spend some time talking about everything that's going on with She-Hulk, and I think that ties into some of this as well. Is that I think all of these issues that these complaints that people are having for female, you know, either helmed properties or female starring properties or however it's playing out, and the people that are getting upset are forgetting that we are in the infancy of this movement of giving somebody like Olivia Wilde the ability to do one movie and then off of that be like, make whatever the fuck you want. Like you can do that. And
it's still a boilerplate. It is still an absolute, like, I mean,
it's a great point.
Directing a movie is for anybody with the expectations of the studio, of it making money, of it getting good reviews. If you're a film director and you get you make a a water world, you might never work again, and it's even harder for women. So I feel like on top of everything, all this pressure, this is just sort of a perfect storm of like.
How dare you speak ill of that piece of art?
I was trying to think of the John Travolta Scientology movie, and I couldn't come up with it. So
Battlefield Earth.
Battlefield
Earth. That was what I wanted to go with.
No, I think that this, and like I said, we really want to dive into this with She-Hulk. But
Waterworld was my first spot.
This is that's amazing.
First spot I saw on screen.
This is like this is such a big thing to consider in movies right now, and the same thing. Jordan Peele talked about it when he was making Us. What is the responsibility? What is the pressure on my back to follow up Get Out, where I completely subverted everyone's expectations, but now I've got to live back up to that. I think that's a very alluring drug to take, and I think Ben, I hadn't really quite seen it that way, but I think that she's in that room, she's doing this interview, she's a woman. Yep. She's a woman who directed a movie with now someone that she's with after a divorce. Like, I think all of that hit her, and she said the wrong fucking shit, and then she just couldn't get out of it.
100%.
I truly think everyone was trying to do the right thing under the circumstances.
This really seems like this seems like one of those scenarios where everybody is trying to do the right thing and nobody's on the same page.
Yes.
Yeah.
Except for Nick Kroll. Nick Kroll. I said that one to you, Nick. There was there was like a TikTok, and it's basically Nick Kroll and one of the other actresses in the movie are in a limo going through the Venice Film Festival, and they're trying to get people's attention, and they're like, no, they're not looking for us. Nope, it's not the ones you want. And then the people could see inside, like, oh, it's not Harry Styles. And it's basically 5 minutes of them driving around.
That's pretty funny.
It's amazing. But yeah, we definitely need to talk She-Hulk next week. I have many thoughts on
Luna loves it.
Hey
boys.
Yeah.
I am officially Marvel canon.
Yes, you are.
We've
in
alerted.
5 hours.
Oh,
5 hours.
Really?
This is my episode.
Oh, that's right. You haven't technically. Well, you were canon because you were in the.
Yeah,
I guess they do like to put those fake outs in.
This is official,
Is it going to be like the Hulk? Like, or were you the stand-in that they put in to be like, no one will ever suspect?
I am
Some
in about
hidden
3
character.
three frames of the latest She-Hulk. That
happens at midnight tonight, right?
Midnight Pacific Standard Time.
God bless you. Tomorrow we won't be able to afford Nick on next week's podcast.
That's true.
Big day.
Well, Nick, we're gonna work to make your deal. I promise you. We are working behind the scenes. We've got the bean counters on it. We will make that deal.
I really love She-Hulk, and I love that Luna loves it too.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to us ramble about 3 things for a good solid hour here.
What's wrong with that?
Hopefully you enjoyed it. Maybe you got something out of it that you hadn't heard before. We'll be back with a new episode sometime this month. We are coming up to Halloween. We are coming up to our 200th episode. We have a lot of things to get through by this year, but I have started thinking about that Halloween podcast because if you guys have not heard them before, it's an hour and a half of just crazy, nuts, bonkers awfulness, and amazing. Somehow listenable. I was very worried after the first one, but you guys seem to like it. So thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Cheers.